Aloha and good morning. I would like to call the Planning and the Economy Committee special meeting to order. I would like to welcome the following members who are present in the council chambers. Council members Say and Wire. I understand Councilmember Okimoto will be coming in shortly, and we are also expecting remotely by video conference Committee Vice Chair Cordero. Pursuant to Hawaii Revised Statute Section 92.3.7, this meeting will be conducted as a remote meeting by interactive conference technology with the following procedures in effect for the meeting. Members of the public will be allowed to provide oral testimony remotely or in person in the council chamber on all items on the agenda when each item is taken up. All persons who register to testify in person will be called upon first, followed by those who register to testify remotely. Persons who have not registered will be given an opportunity to testify following the registered testifiers. For those standing by remotely, please utilize the Zoom raise hand feature to indicate your desire to speak. For those joining us by telephone only, please press *9 to indicate your desire to speak. Before testifying, each person shall state their full name and will be limited to a 1-minute presentation on each item. HRS Section 92.3.7 requires all votes at a remote meeting to be conducted by a roll call unless unanimous. I will first call for objections, and if there are any, I will call for a roll call vote. For those council members participating from outside of the council chamber, under HRS Section 92.3.7, the meeting will automatically recess if we lose audio-visual contact with you and cannot reconvene until we reestablish contact. Therefore, please announce beforehand if you will be voluntarily signing out of the meeting. Written testimonies, including the testifier's address, email address, and phone number, will be available to the public as described in the posted agenda. As a courtesy, please turn off all cell phones. Moving to agenda item number 1. For action, Resolution 23-121 confirms the nomination of Catherine A. Tachner to serve as the Director of Land Management of the City and County of Honolulu. Would the nominee like to say a few words?
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Council members. Thank you for the time and for the consideration, Kat Tachner. I'm grateful to the Mayor for the appointment, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have about the goals and responsibilities of this role. Thank you for your consideration.
How about I start off with just the first question, and then we'll rotate. Can you explain what your priorities are as the Department of Land and Management Director?
Yes, so the Department of Land Management is the newest city department, and as such, I think one of the priorities that I have as director is to establish a good foundation. We don't have policies and procedures, standard forms, and so I really want to build that so that going into the future DLM can be a lot stronger. Other priorities include driving execution on affordable housing, transit-oriented development, and other city priorities.
Thank you. I wanted to welcome Councilmember Okimoto as well as Councilmember Dos Santos Tam. Members, any questions? Councilmember Wire.
Mahalo, Chair. And mahalo, I'll just call you Director. Wanted to say appreciate your service, and I think your resume speaks for itself. I was curious, do you see any opportunities, given your background, to do more interaction with the law school in terms of encouraging like either JD Advantage jobs or trying to pull more practicing attorneys into the city?
Yes, 100%, and I'm actually very happy to announce that we recently hired the city's second dedicated clean water and natural lands program manager, a recent Richardson grad. A lot of the work that we do is negotiating, purchase and sale agreements and other legal documents, so I agree, having that expertise in-house helps. So we've had a couple Richardson volunteers who have gotten their externship credits, but certainly on a prospective basis would love to see more of that.
That's awesome. Mahalo for that. Mahalo, Chair.
Councilmember Shea.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Congratulations, Ms. Tachner. The question I have is that 2 years ago, when we started off on our journey, the 5 members of the council who were freshmen, and as we went along, yes, your department is the youngest department in the overall cabinet. The only concern I have today, what can we do to support you and your department in the conversion of these third-party hire, I don't call it a third party, what you call professional contracts, that I would like to see them be converted from these, professional contracts to a civil service position, so that there is that stability and preservation of the knowledge that they have accumulated.
Yes, that. Hello? Okay, so. Hello? Okay, cool. So this kind of goes to setting up a good foundation for the Department of Land Management. Although we've been around for about 5 or 6 years, only one of the intended 3 divisions were ever set up. And so one of the goals is to set the foundation. And so we're going through a reorg right now, and we're hoping to initiate union consultation so that we can build at least the second leg and pick up staff on a civil service basis versus a personal service contract basis, which is temporal.
Madam Chair, may I follow up? Just that I wanted to say for the record that I think for us as council members, I apologize for not in support of the creation of the new department, based on the premise that there wasn't any funding at the beginning of this creation of this department. It is the council members here who have supported the department and seen that it followed through. One final thought is that I hope by the end of this year, Madam Chair, if there's an opportunity that we could have a discussion on all status of our city and county properties that they have management over. And the reason why I say this, I don't want DLM to be like HCDA. You heard that, Representative Marayoshi? They're not taking care of all of these buildings that HCDA has approved, the maintenance and the operations, and that's a concern that we should be discussing also. It's great that we acquire a property, but can director find the operations manager, property managers for each of our properties that we have in existence today? Because it was brought up 2 years ago about even the parking structures of the apartments in Chinatown. See, and this is a concern I have as far as the added pressures that we'll be putting on the department. So I just bring this up for the record that I'm hoping that HCDA listens, because, I don't want DLM to be in that same predicament. Okay?
Your point is well taken. I think what we might do, and we'll have further discussions with the nominee after confirmation, that we bifurcate it, because there's actually a lot of properties that are not in your inventory right now, and we'd like them to be in your inventory. And Chair Waters, as you know, has identified all of the city properties by district. So if any member does not have that list, please call the chair's office and he can provide that for you. It takes experts to know the potential viability for any type of project, especially affordable housing, but it's there. And so what we'll probably work with you on what you currently manage and what you potentially could manage, because I know that we are working on they have identified a property in Kailua, and I'm going out to a site visit in the near future, so it's not in the inventory now. So your point is well taken. Councilmember Dos Santos Tam, Okimoto, questions?
Thank you, Chair. Aloha, Deputy Director. I had a question, and I think we did discuss this in my office, but if you could just for the record, and I thank you for giving what you say your priorities will be. I wanted to get your viewpoint on the department's, responsibility with the responsibility that I see is acquiring of properties and buildings. But what is your viewpoint on the department managing such properties? I kind of wanted to hear what your thoughts were on that, not just acquiring, but after the buildings are acquired, what do you think the department's responsibility should be in managing these properties?
That's a good question. So the Department of Land Management charter function is to protect, develop, and manage city rural property interests. We have an asset management division which oversees about 1,500 affordable housing units, so we do some direct management. What I'd like to see our department do more of is enter into public-private partnerships where, if we acquire the land, we can partner with a private developer to develop it. I think that would probably be, it's just another tool to add to the arsenal as we look at, how can we best utilize city land.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Councilmember Dos Santos Tam, did you have any questions? Thank you. Okay, my next set of questions includes just the status of your reorganization. Can you provide us an update on the status?
Yes, so as I mentioned, DLM was intended to have 3 branches. We currently have 1. The reorg to create branch 2, the asset development division, we're almost done. We've drafted about 95% of the PDs. We're hoping to finish that this week. Thereafter, we'll put together the package to go to the union for consultation. So we're right on the eve of it. I hope by the next time we take the snapshot in February, we'll have some new civil service employees in our staff.
Thank you. As you know, $225 million was appropriated for affordable housing and $35 million for homeless services facilities to your department in the fiscal 24 CIP budget. Can you share a little bit with us about how you're proposing to tackle that part of your kuleana?
Yes, I think one of the tools that you're probably most familiar with is acquisition. We are working on several large acquisitions that will draw down on a large corpus of that appropriation. We're hoping to close them this calendar year.
How many staff do you currently have on board that works on acquisition and construction projects, and how many of those staff work on affordable housing specifically?
We have 4 staff in our asset development division, plus actually we have 5, plus a secretary. They're all dedicated towards acquisitions and development, and they all work on affordable housing.
Oh, good to hear. And how many development agreements for city lands is DLM currently overseeing, and are there any more in the process?
There are 5 development agreements where the city owns the land and entered into a development agreement. We're working on a couple more, including one for the Kailua property that we're going to go see. Okay, so in the process is just that one Kailua property, or you have others in the work?
We have others in the hopper.
Can you identify some of the challenges that you had in the last 2 years, and how do you think you can overcome those challenges? As Councilmember Say said, we're here to try to support agencies in providing them the resources necessary to advance their objectives.
One of the challenges you've actually help us to solve already. One of the challenges was the restrictions of the money from the prior appropriations. We were able to work with you, and the new budget beginning for the fiscal year 24 gives us a lot more flexibility to build products. So thank you for that. That was very helpful. Other initiatives we're hoping to work with City Council on are, I've shared with you, a lot of you, my concerns. Not concerns, but I think opportunities to refine Chapter 38 to give ourselves better tools to enter into leasing. So,
okay, thank you so much. Members, any other questions? I'm going to now proceed with in-person. Councilmember Wire?
Yeah, just quickly, mahalo, Chair. I was curious, Director, it doesn't have to be your position exactly, but in terms of DLM, when we're talking about affordable, what does that exactly mean? And I only ask because it seems to vary even across departments in the city, and of course from the city versus the state. And so are we looking at particular AMIs when it's in your inventory, or what does that look like?
most of our inventory is at about the 60% AMI, although we have some assets that are lower and some assets that go up to market.
Okay, mahalo for that. Mahalo, Chair.
Councilmember Say, did you have any more questions?
Yes, I just wanted to share with the director that I hope by the end of the year, we will complete the acquisition of the 3 properties you came before this council. If you recall, the 3 properties. Okay. As a school teacher, may I ask one of my colleagues, do they know what the 3 properties are?
No.
No, okay.
I would like for you to tell us what the 3 properties are.
The first one would be the CPB building, yeah, on, I believe, School Street. The second one would be our blood bank, where I used to donate blood on Dillingham and Pool Holly. And the third one would be the Hawaii State Federal Credit Union building on Holly Kawila. Pretty good at my memory.
Okay, you get an A for that. Okay, if there are no further questions, we will now proceed with in-person testimony. Clerks, do we have any in-person testifiers?
Chair, we have one in-person testifier. We have Representative Scott Matayoshi.
Representative Matayoshi?
Good morning, everybody. Scott Matayoshi here to testify in support of Catherine Tashner for Director of Land Management. I will not be taking any questions about HCDA. I've known Kat for a long time. I've known her for over 10 years. And when I started my legal career, I worked with her as fellow associates at a law firm when we first started. I was always impressed by Kat's hard work and dedication, and really her desire to give back to the community too. She sat and sits on so many boards, dedicates so much of her time to the community. I was always very impressed with Kat, both in her work product and also just personally as a friend of mine. As the current chair of labor in the House, we have a lot of issues, I know, both city and state, with hiring good people. And I have personally been trying to recruit Kat to my private law firm for about 5 years now. So while I'm regretting that she will not be there if she's going to be Director of Land Management, I think it's an incredible get for the city to get someone of that quality in this position. Kat has been a private law attorney for a decade. I mean, she has invaluable experience at that level. I think that she's going to be a rare asset for government and for civil service to hire someone of this caliber. And I just really encourage you all to confirm her as Director of Land Management. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Matayoshi. If you have others at your law firms where the city can recruit, we would greatly appreciate it. Members, does anyone have any questions for Representative Matayoshi? Thank you so much. Clerks, are there anyone else in the council chamber who would like to testify?
Chair, there are none.
We will now proceed with remote testimony. Clerks, do we have any remote testifiers?
Chair, we have one remote testifier. We have Angela Young.
Good morning, Angela Young.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, and the City Council members. Angela Melody Young, testifying in strong support of Kat's nomination. Although I don't know her personally, I've heard a lot of good things about her, and I look forward to some of the work that Kat will do with her knowledge and the coordination she's talked about. And no one talked about the emergency proclamation that just got activated last week. And that was about providing relief for disaster damages, losses, and suffering, and to protect the health and safety and welfare of the people. And the emergency order suspends laws in order to expedite the building process. And it creates a Building Beyond Barriers working group consisting of state, city, and non-government agencies to review projects. I think some of the things that Kat has talked about can be integrated within the emergency proclamation. And it's only set for 1 year. So, and also really looking forward to some of the proposals from the Act 279, which appropriated $600 million for the Department of Hawaiian Homelands, because there are a lot of projects that should be in the process of groundbreaking soon.
Thank you, Angela. Thank you so much. And we are actually looking at the implications of the governor's proclamation. And I highly recommend you spend a lot of your time going over to the legislature in the 5th floor over there, asking a little more questions about that with regard to the genesis for that. And, all of the people are going to be part of that working group. But at the City Council, we're going to be looking at it. But thank you for your support for Ms. Tachner. Clerks, are there anyone else standing by remotely to testify?
Chair, there are none.
Members, we are in discussion. Hearing none, the chair recommends that Resolution 23-121 be reported out for adoption. Any discussion, any objections, reservations? Hearing none, so ordered. Thank Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Tachner. Moving to agenda item number 2 for action, Bill 43, 2023 relates to building permit fees. We have for the administration today, Don Takeuchi Apuna, Director of the Department of Planning and Permitting.
Good morning, Chair Kia Aina, members of the committee, Don Apuna, DPP. For this Bill 43, we are not supportive of this measure. We believe that the triple fee penalty is useful for us in our enforcement for unpermitted work. I think since it was enacted in 2020, I can kind of go through some of the numbers that we have. It was enacted July 1st in 2020, and from then to December 30th, 2020, we issued 315 NOVs for unpermitted work or for triple fee penalties. In 2021, there were 616 NOVs. In 2022, 596, and thus far in 2023, we've issued 437 NOVs. This is important because it acts as a deterrent from people, again, moving forward with construction without a permit. We think a permit is necessary to ensure life and safety. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Members, before I open it to questions, I'll be asking a series of questions myself first. Could you share with us how much is a building permit fee now?
So I think it depends on the value of the work. So I can't give you exact numbers, but I can come back to the committee on that.
Do you have a staffer with you right now? Oh, okay.
No, I do not.
Do you think that the triple as opposed to double building permit fee helps to disincentivize property owners from starting construction prior to obtaining a building permit?
I think so. I think triple sounds very, a lot more than double, so yes.
And in addition to triple building permit fees, what other financial penalties are assessed on property owners that start construction prior to obtaining a building permit?
So I think there's daily fines if they continue the work, but it's the initial triple fee if they are working without a permit.
Okay, I think in addition to what I initially asked, I'd also maybe like a summary of like all of the fees, cumulative fees that per annum.
Okay, sure.
Okay, members, any other questions? Councilmember Wire.
Thank you, Chair. Mahalo, Director. First, I was curious, I know you're not the introducer, but through your conversations, do you have any knowledge of the underlying facts or reasons for this conversation? Are there issues going on that you're aware of in the community, or?
No, actually, I'm not. I'm not sure what the origin of this, bill was. So.
Okay, I appreciate that. Do we know what the payment rate is for NOVs? Are a lot of them just outstanding, pending payment, or are we seeing payment made on fines by offenders?
So since this newer administration came in, we have made a change in policy. I think it was like a almost instant reduction to 5 to 10% of the fines, and we've made that change to require 100% unless there were extenuating circumstances. As far as collecting, we are short-staffed, so it's not like we're able to quickly collect, but we have that. And then the collections agency that came in several months ago, the rate with which we are collecting, I think we're still working on that. It's kind of slow at this point, but we will improve that process too and be able to collect sooner and quicker, yeah.
I appreciate that. Is there a standard policy for when further action is taken when non-payment occurs, or is there some discretion there, or what goes on in that consideration?
I think generally when people have fines, they correct, they pay the fine, and then if it escalates and people aren't as willing to make the corrections, pay the fines, then we can do other things, whether it is attached to their driver's license or registration, liens, and then collections, or even foreclosure. it does depend. I think those further steps are in the minority, like I said, but it does depend on the circumstances, and if we hear a lot of issues that continue and we need to be more forceful.
I appreciate that. Just a couple more questions, if the chair would entertain them. Mahalo. So it sounds like I'm hearing you're saying this particular section of the ordinance doesn't preclude discretion when there's extenuating circumstances. Is that?
Yes, that's true. Yeah.
Okay. Could you give me some or give us some examples of what those extenuating circumstances would be?
So it's case by case. It depends on what the specific circumstances are. It could be that they were somehow, they didn't get proper notice, or they didn't know a very, just specific reasons where they couldn't comply for whatever reason. But we look at it case by case. We want to make sure that we have full compliance and full payment of fines, but we will listen to whatever they think might factor into a reduction.
No, I appreciate that, because from the community's perspective, I mean, obviously you want to portray fairness and that you're not, doing deals for different folks and,
Right.
Making sure people make do on what they owe.
Right.
I'm just wondering if intent, I know this is civil, but like on the criminal side, intent is generally a very important element, right? And so I'm wondering if intent factors into this equation, understanding that folks may be coming from different backgrounds or experiences, and maybe engaging in conduct without full knowledge of the law. Not that that's ever an excuse, right?
Right. Yeah, I think it just depends on the circumstances. If it makes sense that this fine wasn't necessarily based on their action or inaction, so other factors, or just it just depends.
Okay, I appreciate that. And then last question, do we have any knowledge or any data on, I guess, the socioeconomic level, could be generalizations too, of those that are getting fines assessed for violations? Do we see it being a certain type of development over another, or is there any information on that?
We don't collect data on that, so I don't think we would be able to determine the type of, or if there's a trend towards the types of offenders.
Okay, because it could be anecdotal too, and I just ask because I know we have in our community multiple entities that are out intentionally violating and engaging in conduct because they know they can get away with it.
Yeah.
And then sometimes you'll come across folks, maybe kupuna, maybe other people in the community that are more operating out of necessity or what they're dealing with in the immediate, right, versus contemplating all the broader implications and the rules and regulations.
Right. Yeah, there's very different types of offenders. I would add that, if you have to do emergency work, then you can put in a permit and be able to proceed with construction. So there is that option too. We just have to understand the circumstances that require immediate construction. But again, we definitely want a building permit before construction begins.
Of course. Mahalo. Mahalo,
Thank
Chair.
you.
Any other questions? The chair recommends that, we will now proceed with in-person testimony. Clerks, do we have any in-person testifiers?
Chair, there are none.
Is there anyone else in the council chamber who would like to testify? Please come forward to the testifier podium and state your name for the record. Seeing none, we will now proceed with remote testimony. Clerks, do we have any remote testifiers?
Chair, we have one remote testifier, Angela Young.
Angela, please proceed.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, and the City Council. Angela Melody Young, testifying in strong support. CARES testifies in support because, in a sense, I think the city is providing relief. So instead of a triple fee, the fee is being reduced to a double fee. Without reading Section 18-6.2 A, B, and C, it will be hard to understand Bill 43. What is the fee for? We must read the chapter in its entirety. This chapter is about building permit fees. It refers to table number Number 18-A, fees for permits, which is a table or schedule for how much a permit fee is according to how much a project valuation is worth. Valuation is a project's total worth. For example, a project that is worth $100,000 to $500,000, the permit fee will be $700 plus 10 per 1,000 of the total valuation. And originally, the fee for the penalty was a triple fee, and it's being reduced to a double. So to simplify what is being amended in the bill, it's saying when a permit is required, but the work has already started before the approval of the permit, there will be a penalty fee, which will be the double.
Please summarize. Please summarize, please.
And this payment of the double fee will not relieve anybody from meeting the requirements to execute this work, nor will it relieve them from other punishment. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Clerks, are there anyone else standing by remotely to testify?
Chair, there are none.
Members, we are in discussion. Councilmember Wire.
Just not reservations.
Thank you. Noting reservations of Councilmember Wire, the chair recommends that action on Resolution Bill 43, 2023 be postponed to a date and time to be determined by the committee chair. Any discussion, any objections, reservations? Hearing none, so ordered. Moving on to agenda item number 3, informational briefing. Update on Resolution 22-207, urging the City Administration and the Liquor Commission to take action to restore public trust in the Liquor Commission, including Liquor Commission Administration Enforcement System Review, Report of Findings and Recommendations. Members, as you know, the Council passed Resolution 22-207 on October 5th, 2022, to urge the Commission and the Administration to take action to address concerns and allegations raised about actions of some of the staff at the Liquor Commission. Since then, the Liquor Commission has been working hard to find an administrator and staff, although they have struggled with that. Mahalo to Anna Hirai for serving as acting administrator despite the challenges of the task. Also, I have seen how much effort the city administration has put into finding well-rounded commissioners to fill open seats, to figuring out how to handle complaints, and to diving deeper into understanding the practices and procedures of the Liquor Commission's enforcement system. This past March, the Deputy Managing Director and the Acting Administrator presented before this committee to share with the plans for a review of the Liquor Commission's Enforcement Services section, and that review was completed in late June. The results revealed the need for significant improvements and included key recommendations moving forward, which I'm excited about because the goal here has always been to create a stronger Liquor Commission. Of course, the work that the Liquor Commission does is so incredibly important to public health and safety to our economy. So mahalo to the administration for undertaking the review and for coming today to share some highlights and next steps. So I look forward to hearing more details about what steps have been taken to create a stronger Liquor Commissions. Members, for your information, the presentation is in your handouts and available online as Mayor's Message 163. We have with us today Deputy Managing Director Krishna Jayaram and Assistant Administrator Anna Hirai of the Liquor Commission. Mahalo nui for both of you for joining us today.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Council members. Thank you for this opportunity to present our work to date, and thank you very much for your continued engagement and focus on the Liquor Commission. So this is an update from what we last presented back in the spring. Just to recap very briefly, as you know, Council passed Reso 22-207, wherein Council expressed serious concerns about the performance of the Liquor Commission, urged establishment of resources to review, and urged us to adopt policies to restore trust. We did respond in a letter later that year, informing the Council about our philosophy, which was that leadership is so critical to do this, and that the improvement must be from the inside, and that we were very much focused on identifying a new administrator who would lead this change. So I want to update all of you on various aspects of our efforts. So first, the administrator search status. So we conducted a search early in 2023. As I've reported to this Council, both our top two finalists ended up withdrawing. So we did take certain actions, which I'll share later, but the Liquor Commission itself commenced a new, more extensive search. Currently, we are optimistic that there'll be a selection made late summer. So that's our goal. Sometime in August, we hope to be able to name a new administrator. And please, if there's questions along the way, we also started a complaint investigation. So as you know, there's a number of complaints that were filed with respect to actions by the Liquor Commission. We reported that we are going to issue an RFQ. We did that. We posted that in May. The deadline was June 5th. Unfortunately, under the procurement rules, you need 3 responses in order to move forward, and we only got 1. So we extended the deadline. We conducted additional mainland outreach, and so the deadline was this past week, July 13th. We did end up getting 3 respondents. So now the committee is looking at those 3 respondents. They will go with the most qualified one, have negotiations with that entity to start this investigation process. So this one also, I am hopeful that if we can come to an understanding with one of these entities, we'll have a fall notice to proceed. This entity will look at all of the investigations that have been, this entity will look at all of the complaints that have been submitted from a particular date last year to now. And then the systems review. This is the systems review that was conducted by Hui Chen. It responds to complaints related to the enforcement services section in particular. It started in February, ended in June, and the report has been made public. Ms. Chen did present to the Liquor Commission at a public meeting, and the report is available to all of you all. If you don't have it, please let me know. I'll make sure to get a copy for you. Unfortunately, Ms. Chen couldn't be here, so she is absolutely the expert on the report, how she went about it. I'll try to answer questions, if any, as best I can, but she is the subject matter expert. But top line is what the chair addressed. Ms. Chen identified a lack of clear policies, procedures, training, reliance on paper documentation, unreliable data, need for training, and need for leadership. So now that Ms. Chen's report has been accomplished, we are moving to addressing the problems, and we're focusing on Ms. Chen's recommendations. We're trying not to focus on assigning blame at this point. We're just trying to move forward on recommendations. So, to date, after Ms. Chen's report was made public, we've had multiple discussions with Ms. Hirai. We've had multiple discussions with Ms. Chen, chair and vice chair, and we're coming up with a plan that focuses on both agency leadership as well as employee buy-in. And we're establishing timelines for each of Ms. Chen's recommendations, as well as who will be responsible for each of Ms. Chen's recommendations. I have details if you want to go into the details, but a quick recap, she had 17 recommendations in total. These are all of her recommendations. And it's a bit of a balance. We're trying to set a plan in place, but we're also anticipating an administrator to come in August. So we want to do as much of the legwork as possible, but then have the administrator ready to put his or her imprint on how this plan should roll out. In addition to the administrator search, the investigation, and the systems review, we have a number of ongoing improvements at the Liquor Commission that I want to share with you. So there is training. We're going to be having National Liquor Law Enforcement Association training for our investigators. There is a new licensing dashboard that has gone live. We anticipate a liquor control information system to upgrade. This is a digital platform for liquor's work. And we are talking to DHR about capacity building within Liquor Commission. We think it would be helpful to get 1 or 2 more high-level individuals in the Liquor Commission to help us move forward in this manner. So this is at the Liquor Commission. As far as at the MDO level, we continue our active search for commissioners. I am very appreciative of the council. You've moved on Ms. Martin, and we're hopeful that she'll be in place by December. It was my error with respect to Mr. Patillo, so we're still looking for 1 more commissioner. If council members, you have such great influence and outreach and connections in your communities, if there's somebody out there who you think would be willing to take on this commission, and it is a hard commission, it meets weekly at 4 p.m. We have 3 men on there right now. We're adding Ms. Martin. I'd love to add another strong woman commissioner, but if there's anybody out there, please let us know. We're also engaging much more directly with the agency. So in the past, the Liquor Commission has functioned as a attached agency to BFS, but we will be engaging much more frequently and much more extensively. So I will be involved with the Liquor Commission. I'll be working directly with Ms. Hirai and whoever the administrator is. We will be expecting the Liquor Commission to be at our cabinet meetings going forward, and we want to just incorporate them much more into the administration as a whole. I think that's been something that's been lacking in the past. Also, we do believe that there's a need for a change in culture at the Liquor Commission, and so that's something we want to work with both the Liquor Commission leadership as well as the Liquor Commission personnel in developing that culture. And finally, we are in the process of establishing a fact-finding function within the city. This is actually, thank you to Chair Kia Aina, this is the ombudsman position. So Ms. Chen and I have been talking about it. We are in the process of developing a PD, and we're looking at other jurisdictions and other municipalities that have similar function to figure out how we craft that PD and design that PD. And we will report back to the City Council on how that's going and how that's looking. So that's my report. I'm here for any questions. Ms. Hirai is here for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Managing Director. Before I start off the line of questionings, I have to tell you, I am very, very pleased with both the leadership of your office as well as the acting administrator, Hirai, because this took a lot of work. And I'm just hoping that it's this type of leadership that we could replicate in some of the other thorny issues that we're working on. And I know that, one of the agencies, of course, that is under the gun is the Department of Permitting and Planning. And of course, we're having an update later today, but I just want to tell you that I'm very happy with what has been done so far. And of course, now the hard work begins with regard to implementation for both short and long-term objectives. But I have a little more confidence now than I had a year ago in the process.
Thank you, thank you, Chair.
Let me just start with reorganization first. The 2005 audit recommended a reorganization, and the 2019 follow-up audit indicates that one was in process. I understand that a reorganization or review of staff positions will take some time and coordination with the unions, but it's been a known issue for nearly 2 decades. Therefore, in addition to what you have already mentioned, can Human Resources start looking into the situation now so that when an administrator comes on board, they can hit the ground running on this?
Chair, absolutely. And if the assistant administration has any background to offer on the reorg, I'd welcome her to share her thoughts.
I can do that. Thank you. Good morning, committee chair and members. Anna Hirai with the Liquor Commission.
If you could pull the mic down a little more. Yeah,
sorry, there we go. There is a reorg effort that has been in process for some time now. It was initiated by the former chief investigator and the former administrator, and got to, with respect to a draft organizational chart and position descriptions that was first, I believe, submitted to DHR in November of 2020. Of course, the timing could not have been worse if you recall what was happening in 2020. And then again was, I think, resubmitted in June of 2021 to both DHR and BFS. We certainly can update the new administrator with respect to the status on this. This is something that probably needs to be reevaluated, mainly because, just in broad terms, the reorg effort which was very specific to field services, would have made positions within the investigator pool progressional instead of promotional, which means that rather than having individuals wait for someone to leave in order to progress up the organizational chain in terms of position, they would fulfill certain tenure and performance requirements. Also, I believe making the investigative pool at a certain level an actual pool that could be drawn upon by both licensing and enforcement, so that would be some good flexibility. The issue we have right now that the new administrator will need to evaluate is that, unfortunately, we are well-staffed in licensing. Our enforcement numbers are fairly dismal. Right now, we've got a enforcement supervisor, 2 shift supervisors, and a total of 3 field investigators, 2 of which are out on leave. So that's an extremely slender, shift supervisors aren't supposed to be out in the field, but they're having to go out. So with those somewhat diminished numbers, and we are constantly trying or pursuing recruitment, that's something the new administrator will need to evaluate in terms of whether this particular proposal makes sense to get in place, or if he has a different idea. So that's the challenge with that.
Thank you so much. I'm going to move on to the use of technology now. I understand there is software that exists to help with determining where enforcement should occur based on input criteria. Has the Liquor Commission looked into purchasing that software yet?
Currently, we have, you've heard the Deputy MD refer to the LCIS-2, or son of LCIS, as we like to, well, I guess I'm the only one that likes to call it that, but that was the initial rollout was in FY18, and the first function that we rolled out was the audit function. So since FY18, that system has had the ability to generate random selection of licensees for audit. In FY24, enhancements to the enforcement mode will include that randomized selection of licensees for inspection or investigation. The challenge will be identifying the criteria that will go into the system so that the randomization is actually slightly deliberate, as opposed to just pulling names out of a hat. So that is already in place, and it is in the LCIS-2 rollout for FY24, so that will happen this FY.
Thank you. On the budget and resources front, I'm trying to understand if the Liquor Commission has the resources needed to implement the necessary changes identified in Ms. Chen's report. I'm looking at whether you have sufficient funds within the Liquor Commission's funds. Second, are you going to need funds in the upcoming budget? And third, I'm just wondering if there are remaining ARPA funds that might be utilized to achieve some of your short-term objectives.
I'll sort of speak. Unfortunately, a lot of this happened while we're spanning 2 FYs in terms of when the budgets go in. For example, the special investigation fact-finding that was the Deputy MD identified, in an ideal world, that would have taken place. The procurement and encumbering of funds would have taken place in FY23 because we had sufficient lapse funds to cover the cost of that. That did not happen in FY23, so that throws it into FY24, and that was not part of our FY24 budget. So what we have done is that since that's going to be a significant unbudgeted expense, we have looked into our existing budget that has already been approved, and we greatly appreciate the additional training funds that you gave us, because we're going to start using them almost right away in this fall at not just the NLEA that was identified, but also it's called the CLEAR training that will Council for Licensing, Enforcement, and Regulatory. That's the extensive training that results in investigative certification. We're going to have to look elsewhere in the FY24 budget to address that expense. And we have identified some areas, but it will mean that we'll have to make sort of priority decisions not to do certain programs in order to fund that one.
Deputy Managing Director, do you have something to add to that?
Thank you, Chair. What I wanted to add was the creation of the budget basically starts now for next year. So as we are looking at all of Ms. Chen's recommendations as well as the prior audit findings, one of our areas of focus is certainly on looking at these items and then thinking about what we're going to be asking for in the budget for Liquor Commission going forward. And to your comment with respect to SLFRF, that's certainly a possibility. As you know, Nana will be presenting on this next. We are trying to meet the council's expectations with respect to hazard pay and other projects. So there's a balancing that we will need to do, but it's certainly a possibility, Chair.
Okay, before I leave on the budget, I do want to say that as you guys look at the, to update the job descriptions, whether it be for high-level or even entry-level investigators, and you consider modifying descriptions to ensure that they're properly compensated, I just want to make sure that you factor that in when you calculate your budgets. So budget for a potential increase so that we could improve the job descriptions and so that they could be, their salaries could be increased.
Chair, absolutely, that's on our
both
list.
for the managerial as well as for the entry-level investigators.
Understood.
Okay, thank you. My last question has to do with administration council powers. It's my understanding that state law governs most of the Liquor Commission's powers and that the administration and council's powers are pretty limited. Namely, it is related to budget, appointing and confirming liquor commissioners, and approving the fee structure. Is that also your understanding?
Chair, you're correct. That's basically my understanding. There is a commission that hires the administrator, and the administrator hires the assistant administrator. They're not like a typical department that reports directly to the managing director.
Thank you for that. I wanted to point out then this out to make it clear that in spite of this, I think the administration and the council has been pretty diligent in working on addressing these concerns because of the importance of the Liquor Commission's work. And I just, again, wanted to mahalo both of you again and hopefully send the message to the hardworking, good staff at the Liquor Commission that I know the scrutiny doesn't make your job any easier, but that we appreciate you sticking with it. And I want to support the Liquor Commission in making their improvements. Thank you so much. Okay, I'm open to questions for other members. Councilmember Wire.
Thank you, Chair. And mahalo, Deputy Managing Director, Administrator Harai, for all the work you're doing. I know it's thankless and there's a lot to do, so appreciate it. I just wanted to, like I said, mahalo you for the internal review and processes you're going to be going through. I guess on the external level or at the macro level, I'm curious, given the mayor signed Bill 2521 in March, the anti-bias and inclusion bill, I'm just curious if there's any updates on broader city reforms or programs that have been implemented in terms of that type of training.
So Councilmember Wire, just to make sure I understand your question correctly, you're talking about the anti-bias bill and whether in our application in a citywide manner or with respect to this particular agency?
Well, it could just be updates that we were able to share with the community because it would apply, of course, to the Liquor Commission, but also broadly to every city department, I'm assuming, right? So I guess just to specify, have there been modifications to our employee training for city employees since the bill passed?
Thank you, Councilmember. So to my awareness, DPR certainly has moved on this item. I'd have to give you a full response. I'd like to go back to departments and get a better sense of where everyone is, and I think that would be more helpful than my guessing at this point.
No, that'd be extremely helpful. Maybe just a little write-up, if can, on the progress.
Certainly happy to do that.
Okay, thank you. Mahalo, Chair.
Councilmember Okimoto.
Thank you, Chair. I do have multiple questions. This first one is for, thank you, Deputy Managing Director. You mentioned on page 10 of your slideshow the technology and the plans for ongoing improvements. Could you give us maybe a timeline and how much you estimate this modernization will cost?
If you're referring specifically to
I'm thinking that's what Peach Time was about, but in general, I wanted to know, yeah.
Yeah, let me defer to the administrator as she has the details on timelines.
Okay. And the cost as well.
Thank you for that question. So with respect to the FY24, there we go, which will include system enhancements to employee registration, the mobile platform, which will include enforcement, and that randomization enhancement. You approved an amount of $125,000. So that's phase 6 of phase 8 of the L2 rollout. FY25, phase 7 system enhancements, $50,000, and FY26 phase 8 final system enhancements, I hope, $50,000. So we're in the home stretch of the L2 rollout, which has taken about 3 times as long as we originally thought. But that's what happens with a bespoke system. We didn't know at the time that it was going to take this long.
Thank you. I had several other questions. You know, I'm not sure if I'm reading the same audit that everybody else is reading, and I understand that when you're in a position, no one understands what you're going through unless you're in it, so I can't speak for the staff that you have and what the commissioners have been doing. But the audit itself had really, to me, troubling and kind of jarring information that was provided on a lot of the, not just inconsistencies, but really concerning information of what's been happening. And so I kind of wanted to get to the root of that, because I do want to be able to address these issues. So if you could just tell us, I know that in the org chart on page 7 of the audit, it has the organization structure, and you currently are the assistant administrator. And so there's the PUCAs are a couple of commissioners, but the administrator is still missing, admin services officer and the field services officer. But for your position, how long have you been with the Liquor Commission? And during that time, I know that you've been there, you've stayed how many, I think longer than anybody else. Can you briefly describe what policies have been implemented to help combat any past scandals and the concerns outlined by the auditor's office? There was a lot of concerns in this audit.
Correct. So when I believe that's the 2005 audit, and we periodically go through an update in terms of progress, in terms of the audit reports, recommendations. The only thing I can say is we have gone as far as we can go with we do have some outstanding or in process audit recommendations that we have not been able to take off the list. But our position is that a lot of those do involve either something involving a charter change and or other city departments, and we continually work on those. Each administrator I've worked for, and the upcoming new appointee will be my 5th administrator since I've started at the Liquor Commission in 2000, has taken up the baton and tried to move it forward. And it's unfortunate that we've not been able to clear the deck, so to speak, of those recommendations, but it's not for lack of trying.
And the previous administrator, how long has that position been vacant?
Mr. Pacaro left the position in April of last year.
And he was there for how long?
He started in, I believe it was in 2013.
So on average, you said this is your 5th administrator, on average 23 years. So
yes,
we're looking at about 4 to 5 years that they're in.
They've ranged in term from about 2 years to about 8 years, roughly.
Okay, and your main, and from your observation, the reason that this position, I can see the difficulty of it, but it's been difficult to fill. What are the main barriers?
Well, I think current publicity is probably a huge disincentive from someone wanting to adopt the role. And there's just, I know it's a fairly specific skill set, a liquor control, and the fact that it is, at one point in time, both my position and the administrator position were civil service positions, which may have brought a degree of comfort in terms of stepping into a role that sometimes is a lightning rod for controversy. And a charter amendment removed that civil service protection, so to speak. I don't know. It's hard to say. Fortunately, there's always someone who is interested after a diligent search and willing to take up the challenge.
And you mentioned the training, and the audit has a lot of information on the response from the staff on how there's lack of training or consistency. What are the efforts been taken to address that? I'm guessing because there's such a turnover, and then you have pukas in here. What is going on with the training? Because if you guys saw, I mean, those who did get to read the audit, it is a lot of things where people are logging in multiple locations at one time. Reports are being done. I mean, it seems some of the claims almost appear to be fraudulent. Some of the, not the claims, but the reports. How could one investigator be in multiple places? And then there's reports of them saying that they're not properly trained. So what is going on in the department that we can address that?
Well, the council actually did take a huge step in terms of, I believe our training budget was increased by almost $20,000. A lot of that is dedicated, in fact, most of that is dedicated to investigative staff, which would include licensing investigators if there's a need, but focus mainly on the enforcement. So that's, and it's not just investigative skills, but some of the, or objective investigative skills, but some of the soft skills also, in terms of something they call verbal judo and de-escalating certain types of situations that we are finally able to provide that training because we have the additional funds to do so, and we appreciate that. We're taking full advantage of all of that extra monies that was, have been dedicated to that.
Glad that we could support in that area, because I think that's something that if you have properly trained investigators, then we won't see the problems that were identified in the audit. But going back to you, talk about the licensing and enforcement. And on your org chart, there is that one area where the field services chief investigator is again vacant, and there's the 2 licensing and enforcement underneath that. With licensing, could you explain to us what is going on with the licensing and why does it take so long to get a license?
Well, as the Deputy MD mentioned, we did launch a licensing dashboard. We don't identify investigators by name, but basically applicants and licensees would be able to go in and look up where they are in the queue. So the licensing section is acutely aware that there are eyes on the backlog, and we're working to address that. I have been pretty liberal with giving them on-demand overtime in order to address that backlog. And if there is a true emergency, someone can always call me, and I can devote individual attention and a response with respect to. And sometimes there is like a large commercial closing that just simply they need more information, and I can provide that.
Sorry, just for if you could repeat to me, what is the backlog exactly, and what's causing the backlog?
I think it's speed of processing. And so something that went into effect January 1 this year, Act 76, statutorily reduced the scope of investigations that would be conducted in terms of licensing. That is greatly, I think, has proved to increase processing time of license investigations, because now a licensing investigator must stay within those circumscribed area in terms of the areas of inquiry, whereas previously they felt that they were required to go above and beyond in terms of investigative scope, and now it's fairly circumscribed in the Act 76, which amended the 281. So one of our performance metrics for our agency is that this is the first year under that new Act 76, so we need to establish a baseline in terms of how fast a licensing application can be processed so we can establish a baseline for future performance improvement. We're acutely aware of the issue involving our backlog, and we've been as transparent as possible. The licensing dashboard shows exactly for each investigator how many items are in his queue, what the average days in process are.
Okay, thank you. And if I could go back to something that I had just kind of mentioned earlier, I think one of my main concerns was just the alarming, I don't know if they're inconsistencies or inaccurate reports that were conducted or input. So right now, if you could explain to me, an investigator goes out there and I see that it was mentioned in here that the time of their shifts is one of the deterrents from getting qualified people, because if anybody has a family, then they're working 7 p.m. to 3 a.m., which is not ideal. But a person goes out there, so are they using pen and paper? Are they doing things with technology to put it in? Because there were a lot of entries that were inaccurate. And some grossly inaccurate, where there was HPD had to be contacted for, there was an account for that. So could you explain to me what is happening so I understand when an investigator goes out there, what are they doing?
Yeah, currently there's, I guess for lack of a better term, a double entry with respect to the in and out and premises visited. So that's both paper and then it is later input electronically. Now, as you know, anytime you have multiple inputs, the opportunity for error kind of increases. So one of the improvements that we're going to be able to do with the new LCIS-2 is explore mobile digital input, sort of when an investigator visits a premises that will be backed by GPS. Now this is something that we have to go through with the union pretty intensely, because there have been issues in the past where in terms of putting GPS on our agency cars, for example. So this is something we'll have to work with the union on.
But according to you, most of the errors were just human input errors. It wasn't someone being dishonest. Some of it, if you're just reading it, it seems like some of this was input, not just by mistake, but it was.
I would say it's probably both largely input errors and carelessness, which should be eliminated if you're entering mobile that's backed by GPS. Now, the item that was that was identified as being referred to HPD, I think was actually a mistake in terms of the way it was described. But that is something where the investigator is going to, I think, was asked to just make an explanation to Ms. Chan in terms of what actually transpired, because he didn't realize that action had been taken before it came out in the system review.
And moving forward, you see, I guess even going back, because you've been here since 2000, so almost 25 years now. Have you seen an improvement, a decline, or the same with qualified people, them being trained properly? Are there evaluations done? Are they updated on things, or are they just hired and then kind of left to do what they will? In your time, it's over 2 decades that you've been there.
Yeah, it's largely it's an ebb and flow process. It is highly dependent on the quality of the chief investigator that the administrator picks. Now, we have been without one since late fall of last year, and that's because even when I was transitioning between acting and assistant, I was not going to make as an important a pick as a chief investigator for the administrator to come. That is, it simply is too important. So
you're going to look at the administrator, and then that person be responsible to choose or select the investigator? Is that
the chief investigator?
The chief investigator.
Yes.
And with that position being empty, I would think that that's a huge gap. So what difficulties are you experiencing because that's not filled either? Who's covering for that person? Is that you?
Basically, I'm covering both the administrator position and the chief investigator position. We didn't, I guess we didn't anticipate that the vacancies were going to extend this long, but it is, we're just maintaining operations while we're waiting.
And if you're filling that position, underneath that position is the licensing and enforcement, which you've mentioned multiple times, having
Yes.
difficulties. So what are you doing in that area? And I'm sorry that you have to fill so many gaps, but this obviously is an area that you mentioned is in high need. So what are the efforts that you're doing to address the licensing and enforcement since you're filling that position that's a puka right now?
Most of my contact basically is with the two supervisors. So there's a licensing supervisor and enforcement. One thing, I sign off on all of the timesheets and approve overtime, and they just simply update me verbally with respect to activities going on in their section.
Okay. Thank you for answering my plethora of questions. I appreciate your
That's all
time.
right.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councilmember Shea?
Good morning, Ms. Hirai.
Morning.
Well, listening to the discussion has been very frustrating. And I would hope that the Deputy MD would communicate with our state legislature in regards to Chapter 89, which is collective bargaining, and Chapter 76, 77, which is our civil service laws. I'd rather go back to creating a foundation or a baseline saying, what are the minimum MQs for an individual that we'd like to hire as a chief, not chief inspector, but a regular inspector reporting to the supervisory inspector?
Basically, it is 2 years of investigative or inspectional work, and this is something that was implemented by the former chief investigator and administrator, an undergraduate degree in a sort of a related field, such as criminal justice. So they substituted in that educational equivalent for actual field investigative or inspectional work, which sometimes was an impediment to getting people to apply.
That's the point, Ms. Hirai. At this point in time, after all these years, at the national level or at the state level, we should have some concrete curriculum or minimum qualifications for these type of positions. Would it not have been okay if we talked to the community colleges in creating an associate degree?
That certainly would be a possibility and an opportunity. We have in the past participated in job fairs that, for example, like Chaminade has a criminal justice undergraduate degree program, just to answer questions in terms of what it might be like to work for the Liquor Commission as an enforcement investigator.
I just want to start off by, where do we begin? That's the whole point. I think for us here, for me personally, I think you folks are doing an excellent job covering all bases. You folks do go to the liquor establishment. You folks all go to the wholesalers to look at their annual sales report, da-da-da-da-da. What I'm trying to get at is that this individual that is an inspector has to do all of that. He even has to be an auditor in looking at the finances of a wholesale company, a restaurant company, restaurant business, or a bar business. And like I said to you earlier, this past 2 years, I enjoy reading your weekly report because I look at the citations. And then I see the appeals. And that's where I feel comfortable to a degree, but why are we not recruiting? You see, if I know Ms. Chen talked about policy, is it the state's policy or is it the 4 counties' policies? Are we all together in one as far as the curriculum? That's number one. Number two, the qualifications of these inspectors, or does it vary from 4 counties, the qualifications?
Well, all of our investigators are union members.
That's
So-
why I say chapter 76, 77, chapter 89. Are we here to do something or we're not here to do anything? And that's where I'm coming from. And I hope whoever, what BU are these inspectors in?
3 and 4.
Bargaining units 3 and 4, which is HGEA,
Pardon me?
which is HGEA.
Yeah.
Well, that's where I think maybe the administration can approach them to see, what can we do to improve the system itself? Or it's just going to be the way it is as it continues on. Are those 3 chapters tying the hands of the Liquor Commission? I don't know. But I bring this up because this is the kind of discussion we need openly and publicly. I'm not bashing the union. I'm just trying to figure out a way that we can improve the system and the service that we can have in place, rather than having it continue on for the past. It started with the audit of 2005, so that's 18 years ago. And we're still at the same position today, this morning. That's the way I feel, because we're not going to the core problem of, is it the MQs that is standardized throughout 4 counties? Is it the SR that we have to, pay them a better rate because they are a person of a jack of all trades? If I had an accounting degree, would I qualify in doing a lot of the audits? Not in the criminal side, as far as enforcement of, you cannot do this, you cannot do that. Can I see your employee list? Are they licensed or whatever? Registered, right? The employees have to be registered at every establishment. This is the kind of stuff that I can sympathize, Madam Chair, with these particular workers. And having this discussion, thank you very much. I did talk to Ms. Chen. I did talk to Commissioner Hong, because, and I did talk to the Deputy MD, that I want to help again, once more. Let's get out of this rut and move forward. And finally, Madam Chair, in the budget these past years, they generate more revenues than what we appropriate the funds for. So there is that excess, that they're generating excess revenues that goes into the general fund. But thank you very much for generating the excess revenues. Okay, Ms. Hirai, you don't have to respond. I just wanted to share my manao with you folks.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Say. Councilmember Dos Santos Tam, did you have any questions? Thank you. Thank you for the presenters. We're going to proceed with in-person testimony. Clerks, do we have any in-person testifiers?
Chair, there are none.
Is there anyone else in the council chamber who would like to testify? Please come forward to the testifier podium and state your name for the record. Seeing that there isn't anyone, we will now proceed with remote testimony. Clerks, do we have any remote testifiers?
Chair, we have a remote testifier, Angela Young.
Angela, this is on the report that was conducted by the administration by Wei Chen.
Okay. Okay, about the report, I can comment about the Liquor Commission, like in general?
No, I would like for you to comment on the report. That's what this hearing is about. Please provide your manao on the report. That is what this hearing is about.
Okay, I was actually going to comment about the prejudice against gays, but if it's just about the report, then never mind.
Okay, thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye. Clerks, is there anyone else standing by remotely to testify?
Chair, there are none.
Members, we are in discussion. Councilmember Okimoto.
Thank you, Chair. I want to thank, again, the discussion that we had, and thank you for being here to answer our questions. I think I'd like to see more updates. I do have concerns, because if we had an audit in 2005 and 2023, and the same, and I wasn't here for that previous audit, but if the situation hasn't gotten better. And some of the reports that were in this audit are concerning to me. I would like to see if we are funding the commission and, we can provide training. I just would like to ask that we get more updates on what's happening along the way.
Sure, but what I would like to be focusing on, quite frankly, is the report that was done by the commission. So you have that in hand as well, right?
You're correct, yes. And
Yes,
part of that, they did have things, and it was broad, and I asked some questions about, the modernization of the technology. So if Chair, if you
Yes,
would
so
be
I would
kind-
recommend that periodically we would get an update, just as we get an update on ARPA funds and the DPP permitting process, we'll get an update on the implementation of this report.
That would be great, thank you.
And of course, if there are other recommendations in the previous audits that you're concerned about, that you believe that this report hasn't covered, then please bring that to their attention.
Thank you, Chair.
Any other comments by any of the members? Thank you so much. We're going to move on to agenda item number 4, update on the allocation and use of American Rescue Plan Act fiscal recovery funds. Members, for your information, the presentation is in your handouts and available online as Mayor's Message 164. We have for the administration, Deputy Managing Director Krishna Jayaram.
Good morning again, Chair, council members. Thank you for having this hearing, and thank you for your continued focus on SLFRF. I have a relatively brief presentation. It's going to cover the current status of the FRF commitments, and I did want to update you. Council did pass a hazard pay resolution, and I just want to share with you what we're doing with respect to that resolution. So as of July 15th, Tranche 1 is 98% committed. Out of the 193 million, 190 million is committed. Tranche 2 is 74% committed.
Sorry,
Of course.
Deputy Managing Director, we've just lost quorum. I'd like to delegate to Councilmember Dos Santos Tam, pursuant to Council Rule 8D. Council member is designated as temporary voting member. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So with respect to current commitments as of July 15th, Tranche 1 is 98% committed at $190 million. Tranche 2 is 74% committed at $143 million. So as of right now, 87% of all of the FRF monies are committed. And by committed, what I mean by that is that it has gone through the FRF committee, and that the departments are executing on projects. And this is our publicly available dashboard. It shows you that same amount approved. The expended number is on the right at 124 million, and the encumbered number is in the middle. And the encumbered number is a point in time. The most important slide, at least for my purposes today, in terms of what I wanted to update the council member is this next slide. So the council passed a reso asking us to look at the use of FRF dollars for hazard pay. So we are in the project of evaluating and scrubbing through all of the Tranche 1 projects primarily. And we're looking for projects that aren't performing as well as we believe they should be. So we're looking at all projects approved prior to February 2023, because we feel that anything prior to February 2023, we should be seeing significant movement in terms of the project execution. So for those projects prior to February 2023, if they've had no funds encumbered or expended, we will be calling in the departments to have a discussion about what's happening with those projects. Additionally, we are looking at projects where there's a disproportionate encumber expenditure rate, meaning that not as much has been encumbered or expended as we would hope. So again, for those projects, we'll be having the departments come in and having a discussion about where they are. And the purpose of this is to make sure that we're on track with the December 31st, 2024 encumbrance deadline, as well as to see if they're non-performing projects, if there are good reasons they're non-performing, those are monies that we would like to identify from Tranche 1 that could potentially be used to address the hazard pay issue that the council raised. And I kept my presentation brief today, but I'm here for any questions. Thank you.
Members, any questions? Deputy Managing Director, do we have an idea of projects in the queue that don't account for? So what, you have 2 plus 26%. What's the remaining percentage of funds that are available?
Of the entire FRF, about 30% hasn't been committed in any
30%.
manner.
And how many projects are in the queue?
In terms of projects that have been approved under both Tranche 1 and Tranche 2, there's probably in the neighborhood of 30 to 40 projects that are being worked on as we
that
speak.
could would accommodate that 30%?
Oh, sorry. By projects in the queue, you mean projects that have not been moved
Yes.
forward. There's probably a good half dozen to a dozen projects that have not yet been executed that could account for the remaining
And what
13%.
percentage do you think is available that we need to maybe encourage you to pursue? Do we have any flexibility?
If I'm understanding the question correctly, the projects that have not yet been committed,
Yeah.
the departments are struggling to figure those out. So that will be a discussion where we will come back to the council and share why the departments are struggling and get guidance from the council on what council might want to see done with those funds.
And can you explain again about the hazard pay?
So the city council passed a resolution asking us to look at FRF as a possible source to address hazard pay issues. And that's what we're doing in looking at the non-performing projects in Tranche 1.
To see where you can get the funds.
Correct. To the extent that they're non-performing, if there's a reason they're non-performing, to claw back that money and reuse that potentially for addressing the hazard
What's
pay.
the number for the hazard pay?
I do not have a definitive number. That's something that we're working on now.
Councilmember Say, did you have any comments? Because they're going to be wrapping up this section. This is on the ARPA funding. And if you look at the last page on non-performing projects, the deputy manager just explained that this is the criteria that they're going to be looking at for those projects that are non-performing to potentially use those funds for the hazard pay.
No,
Correct.
I'm happy that you are using the FRF funds for that particular area, because I think for those first responders, they need that hazardous pay fund as a discretion. But will it not be up to
Can you speak into the mic, please?
will it not be up to collective bargaining to make that determination, or is it all four counties that are going to go in as one to say, yeah, we are going to address hazardous pay for the non-performing service?
So, council member, thank you for that question. Part of the reason I couldn't answer the chair's response as far as the final dollar amount is because that is a matter of discussion. And so we do not have that number yet. We're trying to see as much as possible. We're trying to be disciplined about the usage of FRF money. So we will pull back anything that is underperforming or non-performing, and that will give us the flexibility.
Madam Chair, may I just say one final thought and comment? I wanted to say thank you very much for really pushing and initiating OER in getting our rent utility program off as far as moving ahead on it, because it has really benefited the renters who have not qualified for this particular fund. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. And the rent utility relief program has been as much of a success as it has been because of the support and encouragement by the City Council. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Wire, do you have any questions relating to ARPA?
Not at this time, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember, okay. Thank you so much for your presentation. We will now proceed with in-person testimony. Clerks, do we have any in-person testifier?
Chair, there are none.
Is there anyone else in the council chamber who would like to testify? Please come forward to the testifier podium and state your name for the record. Seeing that we have no one, we will now proceed with remote testimony. Clerks, do we have any remote testifiers?
Chair, we have Angela Young online.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, and the City Council council members, Angela Melody Young, testifying in support of the American Rescue Plan Act funds as it relates to everything that we just talked about, and the hazard pay eligible to city employees who've performed essential work during the COVID infection that resulted in a public health emergency. And, you know, I don't think there should ever be an oppressive work style where people are slaves and work without getting paid. So I'm looking forward to the resolution being finalized. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Clerks, is there anyone else standing by remotely to testify?
Chair, there are none.
Members, we are in discussion. Councilmember Okimoto.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Deputy Director, for presenting to us. I maybe had just one suggestion on you guys were on the slide for the non-performing projects. Maybe just a suggestion, if we could shift some of the unencumbered funds to help EMS expand core with some of the projects that you had on here. It's just a suggestion. I didn't ask in the form of a question, but thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember. We are now going to move on to agenda item number 5, informational briefing update from the Department of Planning and Permitting on building permit process backlogs. For members, for your information, the presentation is in your handouts and available online as the Departmental Communication 532. We have for the administration today, Don Takeuchi Apuna, Director of the Department of Planning and Permitting.
Good morning, Chair and committee members. Thank you for this opportunity to provide another update on the DPP's building permit process backlog. So you're familiar with this chart, which shows you some of the statuses that we have provided previously, as well as the most recent status on the bottom row. We have been able to come down a little bit in the pre-screen phase, but it has gone up a little in the code review, and that is, again, the shift of the backlog from the pre-screen to the code review. As you can see, from the first status to the second status from EMLA to April 6th, there was a big drop, and we've kind of held steady since then. But over the next few months, we think we'll see another big drop based on a lot of the things that we have been doing. For one thing, I think we reported several months ago that the backlog in the pre-screen phase was about 3,600 applications, and today we're at about 1,100. So that's a big drop, and I thank the staff for working so hard on that. So again, to address the backlog, we are focused on 3 major areas. It's the people, processes, and technology. For people, we continue to hire. Since January, we've hired about 7 plans examiners for the residential side, so we've been very successful there. On the commercial side, we do have the 15 engineer positions, but we have not been able to fill those. We are working hard at trying to, but competition is, it's hard for us to compete with private and federal, but we will continue to try to hire and come up with creative ways to get some engineers on board. Under that, we have recently created an internal surge team to work on the pre-screen and residential code review. We've recently trained them on the pre-screen, so there's about 7 staff volunteers that are going to help to add capacity to the pre-screen. So again, I think that's going to be that's going to help to show a greater drop in the pre-screen area. And then below that, we recently established a pilot job training program. And this is using personal services contracts and focusing on high school graduates, college students, college graduates, and retirees who may be interested in this type of work. We've created training for these positions. And if you might not have the experience currently, if you stick with the program, you may be able to gain the experience in order to get a civil service position through this program. And then lastly, the contract for the ICC code reviewers to help augment, more likely in the commercial side, some of the review. We are working on that contract and hope to get that going too, which will help as we try to hire engineers and train them, that this will at least help to bring down the backlog while we try to make those hires. Long-term and short solutions for the processes. We continue to re-engineer and streamline our business processes. We've established SOPs. For instance, in the pre-screen area, we went and looked at our current process and really slimmed it down, took out things that we thought were unnecessary. So the pre-screeners now have new tools to help them pre-screen plans more efficiently and effectively. We continue to work on removing outside agency reviews and shifting those reviews and approvals prior to submittal of the building permit application. I know I presented this to you last time, so we're working with the different agencies. We've been getting good feedback, and we think that in time we'll be able to move those outside of the building permit process, but will require a lot of information that we need to create to educate the applicants so they know exactly where they need to get these reviews prior to the application of the building permit. And then lastly, for processes, Michael Catt, our planner who helped to stand up the Oahu Historic Preservation Commission, he has looked at the role of this commission and his role as the staff person of the commission and how that will help streamline. So part of it will be the rules that the commission will begin to establish. We'll be able to clearly delineate what types of projects should or shouldn't go through SHPD. Right now, our clerks kind of have a basic understanding of what should go to SHPD and what shouldn't, but there can be definitely some more refinement in that area. And through the rules process, that will make it even more clear to the public and applicants. Also, Michael Catt as a liaison between SHPD, the applicants, and the commission. When clerks are unsure of where the application can go, he can have a second look and make a determination. Otherwise, he can provide it to the commission so that they can do further deliberation and review. The third area is technology. And so this slide, if you look at the picture, I don't know if you know what that is, but that's a pneumatic tube machinery that up until last year we were actually using to deliver our payments to Treasury. And right now, in 2021, there was a flood, and it broke the pneumatic tube machine, and we couldn't find anyone to fix it. But thank goodness, but now it serves as a paper towel holder. But this is the technology that we began with just a couple years ago, and it's important that we really update technology. Our current permitting software is the POSSE permitting system, and it works with the E-Plan system, which is the submittal software for the plan. So POSSE came about in 1999 for the department, and if you think about it, back in 1999, we were still using flip phones. We didn't even have smartphones. We've come a long way since then, and technologies have certainly evolved and improved. POSSE is a highly customized platform, and we're reliant on the vendor to make modifications. So when we need specialized reports or we want to add a checkbox in our permit applications, we have to ask our vendor, and we're billed hourly. So it's not a very sustainable relationship. POSSE lacks automation, so many manual processes within POSSE. So when I've sat down and tried to do the pre-screen myself, I'm having to check and move information here and there within the system. Again, we lack a centralized financial payment system. We got to replace this pneumatic tube with online payment. And we have a lot of different types of payments, whether it's permit fees or otherwise, that needs to be quick and efficient. And the system lacks transparency. I know that we all deal with this, well, council members deal with this. We're constantly being asked, where is my permit? And the new system will be able to let anyone know where their permit is in the process and how long it's been here or there and where it needs to go next. The E-Plan system, which was started in 2013, and it really hasn't been upgraded since then. It it works in conjunction with POSSE, but it connects only at 2 separate points. So when you go into POSSE and you open up a project, it goes to E-plans, but then you have to log into E-plans and you watch this swirly thing as it thinks and tries to connect. So the connection can be better between the electronic plans and the permitting system. So to deal with these issues with respect to technology, including short-term rentals, we are looking at some vendors to help with the enforcement and registration. That too, it's very technology-based. So recently, we have added capacity to our ePlan server. We've also did a request for information for potential software permitting systems, and staff has sat through 14 different vendor demonstrations. And from there, we issued a request for a statement of work under a state master agreement, NASPO contract, to directly contract with one of the permitting vendors. So this is very exciting because I think within a few months we will have a contract and we'll be able to move forward with setting up that new system. A new system that will have automated processes, centralized financial payment systems, will provide detailed building permit application status, accessible data and reporting, and integration with our inspections. We also need to upgrade ePlans to the latest version. I mentioned that we're pretty far behind, so we're trying to work on the contract to get that updated, which will provide some comfort to the applicants, because as we set up the new system, we still have to move forward with POSSE and ePlans and make that transition simultaneously. So it's important that we keep the current system running and give it all it can to work effectively and efficiently, but at the same time, we will be installing or bringing on the new system. A major part of kind of where we feel that our current system is kind of failing is because we lack full-time support or management of the IT in our department. So in 2019, we did have 2 full-time positions that were overlooking our GIS, our POSSE, our ePlans. But since then, we don't have that oversight, and we need to get that again because so much of our technology, like I said, the short-term rentals, the permitting, ePlans, it should all be under a manager within our department who understands our business processes and our subject matter. I mean, we really do appreciate DIT, who are very supportive of a lot of the infrastructure, technological infrastructure in our department, but it's important that we have someone full-time in our position, in our department, to really understand everything that we do and make sure everything's running smoothly, we get the latest updates, et cetera. So that basically, people, processes, and technology, this is how we're tackling the backlog. We're well aware of our shortfalls and how we're going to tackle each part of this. But I wanted to address, you know, we're doing everything we can, but we often get called out about us holding on to permits for a very long time. So this slide is a recent, just a very current example. Hawaii News Now called us, and this developer, or this hot pot restaurant developer, said that his permit was with DPP for over 352 days. And I would like to say that that's can't be true, that a permit is never completely always with DPP. This next slide, looking at his particular building permit application, the pre-screen definitely is kind of a long time. It looks like 86 days, and that's what we're focusing on, and that I explained that we're trying to tackle and will significantly be reduced. The DPP code review was 100 days, and then it went through our zoning plans for 14 days, HFD for 10, wastewater branch 3, and Board water supply for 2. But it was with the applicant for 145 days, which included, these were paper plans, so prior to our requirement that everything comes through ePlan. So part of that time is the was the actual physical delivery of the plans back and forth. And then some of that time was also with the applicant addressing comments. But we just want to be put it out there because Hawaii News Now, we gave them this information, but they didn't say that, well, it wasn't 350 days with DPP. It's back and forth in other areas. But we will continue to work on slimming down our time that it's with us, but people should be aware that it's not always with us, and you should be aware of what you can do on your part to help make the process go faster. So again, you know, people think all these plans are just waiting at DPP when they're wondering where their building permit application is. But sometimes it's with another agency or with your consultant. But always try to get the facts from your consultant or DPP about where your permit is. Provide good quality plans because that just makes it go faster and you don't have this cycling of comments and trying to address comments. And when you get comments, address them fully, and that will help on your part to get your permit processed quickly and efficiently. So with that, that's my presentation. I'm open for any questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Director. You know, with regard to, so we do get a lot, and I send a lot of risers over, but can you tell me when is the system going to be up and running where people would be able to go online and find out exactly where their application is?
So with this new software, so hopefully we can contract in the next few months. It's going to take 1 to 2 years to get the whole thing set up, but we can phase parts of it. And I know that this would apply to all new permits coming in, right? So whatever's in process while the system's being set up, it would be hard for us to provide the status part. But if it's a new application, we can try to have that as one of the first phases, that when you put your application in, it'll automatically say where the permit is. So I would like to say, you know, within a year, hopefully that will be the case for any new permits that come in once the system is going.
And can you explain to us then, because we send it via risers, what can we expect when we send a riser in? Is there a warm body over there to be able to find out what happened and to give us an update on where it is and what the problem is?
Yes, so whenever we get a riser and we get an application number or a TMK, we go into our system and it shows a listing, but yeah, it's not a publicly shown status, but we do. It takes a person to manually go through and find that information and even go through the comments and read through it and understand what's happening with the application.
Thank you for that. I have to tell you that we found out that a great percentage is with the actually applicant or their agent or handler. And I don't know what you guys could do to maybe do a workshop to just or an educational awareness campaign about how applicants may also want to check with their with the person. What do you call those people who help them?
Just their consultants, their runners.
Okay,
yeah,
runners.
Their
okay.
architect, engineer.
I found that a lot, but okay. And then my other question is, in your pre-screen in the first page,
Yes.
and you talk about the months. You actually gave numbers with regard to the number of applications. Do you think? And you've said that it's actually decreased the number of applications because you're addressing the backlog. Is that correct?
That's correct. They've moved out of that area. So there were, like I said, 3,600 several months ago, and now there's 1,100 in the pre-screen queue.
That means everything else is already in the system, that's why.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, that might be handy to be here so we can see the actual numbers, because a logical question would have been, why did we have 2 months in April and then we're back down to 2 months in July? And that's because you've whittled down the overall number of applicants, correct?
Right, yeah. And when we get through this pre-screen backlog, the 1100, we will be able to stay up daily with what's coming in. So
Okay.
it's just getting through that big mountain.
And when you think that's going to happen?
I think in the next couple months.
Next couple of months, okay. And then tell me about, again, about, I know the code review is complicated. Tell me again about how you're going to help in shortening the time for the code review.
So for the code review, it's a lot of staffing that we're trying to augment those reviews. It's also that ICC review, the contract, particularly for the commercial reviews. And then when we do get through the pre-screen backlog, we can use that staff, some of them, to move towards the residential code review as well. So it's about capacity and moving that capacity around based on when we can move the.
And when do you expect that time frame to decrease?
For the code review, it's going to take a little bit longer, I think. Generally, I think that the 3 months, certainly we want to bring it down, but it's pretty reasonable compared to the pre-screen, which has been probably the worst part of it.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's where the bottleneck has been.
Right.
Okay, thank you so much. Councilmember Wire.
Thank you, Chair. And mahalo for this great news, Director. I was curious, so the 7 plant examiners that were added from January, those are service contracts or civil service?
Those are actually civil service.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I just wanted to touch base on the approved to issue. What is that process again? Because I know we previously talked about waiting for plans to get picked up or permits to get picked up. So maybe if you could just explain a little bit more about that.
Sure. So the approved to issue is once the permit has been reviewed and approved by the examiners, then we call the applicants to come get it and make their payment, provide their contractor statements at that point. So it's the processing of the payment, et cetera, and getting that necessary documentation.
Okay, appreciate that. What would cause that number to have come down so much from 2 months on our side if, I'm assuming we're typically waiting for the applicant in that area?
Oh, so from 2 months to 3 weeks?
Yeah.
Yeah, we really tried to have staff focus on that area because we were able to just, I guess, certain areas make sure that we, lower the backlog there. But so that area specifically, the technology, the automatic payment will just make it instantaneous.
Okay.
Yeah, so that will be, once it's approved, we should be able to click a button and then an email is shot out to the applicant and they can pay online and they'll get their permit. So it's a
Okay.
technology issue, but we still continue to try to bring down that line too.
Okay. The only reason I ask is I feel like if was as soon as we send notification to the applicant, like maybe that should be our timeline
Right,
where we're like, oh, this is what we made.
yeah.
At least in my mind. So I don't know if we can just cut that out or not.
Right.
I know you said the 1100 is going to come down. And did I hear correctly when you said once we get through it, there won't be a backlog at all? Or is there a certain number we should be looking for?
Yeah, I think we can daily, the staff can keep up with
Awesome.
the basic rate that comes in daily, weekly. It's just, we just got to get through that big mountain.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. And then just last question. Do you know if the governor's emergency proc affects this at all, or it's too few projects to really make a difference?
Yeah, we haven't really, we still have to look at the proclamation and how that's going to affect us.
Okay.
Yeah. Mhm.
I'll leave it at that, then I won't dive deeper. Mahalo, Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember. That would actually be a good informational briefing to have something on the governor's proclamation.
Good idea. Maybe we'll let Director review it first, and then we can dive into it.
Okay, thank you.
Mahalo.
Councilmember Okimoto.
Thank you, Chair. My question actually was connected to what Councilmember Wire just asked you, but I did want to thank you. It's such great news, and I know that the department, even before I got into this position, has been an issue that everybody talks about. So I appreciate you coming down and explaining to us. I'm a visual person. I appreciate the cartoons. I'm sure many, if not all of us, have been victims of the media not portraying what we do or say accurately. So as a former teacher, I appreciate you throwing in cartoons there because it helps even someone like me to be able to explain to others when they ask or complain about what's going on. These are really good statistics, and I just applaud you to hear from 3,600 to 1,100. That's really significant, so thank you.
Thank you.
I did, just in conjunction with Councilmember Wyer's question, I was going to ask, what are your thoughts on bringing the numbers down? And so you mentioned that at some point the goal is to get it out. And when do you anticipate that being able to happen, where we don't have the backlog?
Yeah, so the backlog, I think, again, maybe in the next couple months, the pre-screen, we can get down. It's going to shift then to the code review. When we get enough staff, I think, and then the technology, so that when that all comes together, I think we'll be able to say, ideally, like a commercial project should only take 1 to 3 months, residential 1.5 months at that, and maybe even better. But it's all these different, to have enough people to do the job, and then the technology is going to be really, really awesome as far as automation and streamlining.
Can you remind me when that technology was going to take effect?
Yeah, so I think it's we're hope to get into contract in the next couple months, and from what I understand, a lot of them can start to phase in parts or functions within a few months. So we might see things within a year to really affect the process.
And then this last column here, so your estimation, total average duration at the end of all of these things, if we could align them properly, what are your thoughts on what would be the total average duration for a
yeah, I think it would be like 1 to 2 months for residential and maybe 1 to 3 for commercial. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Director. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Director. I think we're going to move on to in-person testimony. Clerks, do we have any in-person testifiers?
Chair, there are none.
Is there anyone else in the council chamber who would like to testify? Please come forward to the testifier podium and state your name for the record. Seeing none, we will now proceed with remote testimony. Clerks, do we have any remote testifiers?
Chair, we have Angela Young online.
Angela, this is about the BPP permitting process.
Yes, Chair. I testify in support of the update from the DPP on building permit process backlogs. With what's going on at Kahale across from Queens, it's really proved that there can be expedited permitting processes to address backlog. The Kahale that was built in Waianae, and then there was also talk about the other islands. There will be more Kahales, which will bypass the backlog and antiquated permitting processes. I really hope that there is a plan to integrate where we're at with DPP and the emergency order and the state plans as it relates to housing and homelessness. The emergency order applies to the city in the way which it creates the BBB, Building Beyond Borders working group, which integrates the work of the Department of Budget and Finance and county's permitting department and the Board of Water Supply. And it delegates power to the chief housing officer while suspending the laws of Chapter 6E for SHIP-D, Section 46-4, County Organization and Administration, Chapter 77, Officers and Employees, Chapter 103D of the Hawaii Public Procurement Codes, Section 201H as it relates to housing development, exemptions for statutes, charter provisions and rules, and Section 205-3.1A and 205-4 as it applies to the Land Use Commission and Chapter 343. And so, yes, hence I am in support because it is possible to process backlog and to address the permitting concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. Clerks, is there anyone else standing by remotely to testify?
Chair, there are none.
Members, we are in discussion. Councilmember Wyer.
Just wanted to say mahalo, Chair. I think all the briefings we had today were extremely helpful and look forward to continued conversation.
Thank you so much. We are moving on to our last agenda item number 6, informational briefing update from the Department of Planning and Permitting on Development and Sustainable Communities Plan schedule and transit-oriented development plans and zoning status. Members, for your information, the presentation is in your handouts and available online as Departmental Communications 531. We have, again, for the administration, Dawn Takeuchi Apuna, Director for the Department of Planning and Permitting.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, you have the report. I also have staff here, Dina Wong for some of the plans and Tim Streitz for TOD if there are any specific questions on this update.
I know that you guys give these updates, but can you highlight for us what we need to be thinking about here? That is, we're anticipating that action by the council in the near future?
Let's see. For the near future, for plans, I'm going to defer to staff.
That was a trick question.
Hello, good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. We have quite a few plans in process, and the first one that's going to be headed to council is our primary urban center development plan update. We are so far targeting transmittal to Planning Commission in October, and following that, it will head over to the council. Our other plans are further behind. Let's see, we're anticipating the North Shore Sustainable Communities Plan. We're looking at having a public review draft out in the first quarter of 2024. So that's quite a ways out. And then our Waianae Sustainable Communities Plan is, we just held our first, and we had 2 pop-up events this past Saturday, so it will be a while before that heads over to council.
Okay, so the primary urban center development plan is going to be the most likely one coming to the city council sooner than everything else. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then fourth quarter, well, when you have the planning commission hearings, how long does that process take?
It is a lengthy plan, but it is usually one hearing.
Oh, one hearing. Okay, and so you're talking about what, September, October? Between September and December?
We're anticipating having it transmitted to Planning Commission and holding a hearing in October.
Oh, October. Okay, yes. And then after that, then it will be transmitted to the city council. Okay. Yes. Thank you for that. Members, any questions? Yes, Councilmember Wire.
Thank you, Chair. Mahalo for the update. Just to come back to the North Shore. So first quarter, that's the calendar year. So like January timeframe of next year. Okay. And then so that would be kind of the same process. So we'd expect that to be later in 2024 that it gets finalized, or?
Right. The public review draft will be released, and then we have usually about a few months for public comment and agency review. Then we incorporate that in the same process. It goes to Planning Commission and then to Council.
Okay. So when community workshop, what does that look like?
The one we just held, well, that was for Waianae, and it was a little bit of a different format. Instead of the usual workshop where we have it in the evening at a school cafeteria, we held it at 2 farmers markets. One was at Nanakuli and one was at Waianae. And it was more of a, we had a booth where we had boards set up, and we just had it staffed by DPP staff and consultant staff, and just talk story with folks that were there at the market to get their input.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So in terms of the North Shore one, we don't necessarily know what the format will be because
No,
it's so far
not yet,
off.
because ever since COVID, things have changed so much. A lot of it was online, but we're trying to get back to more in-person engagement.
Okay. Mahalo. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Councilmember Okimoto.
Thank you, Chair. If Director Apuna could come back, I just had a quick question, kind of a follow-up. And I know that you mentioned you hadn't yet read all of the proclamation that the governor just released, but I'm going to ask you this, and hopefully maybe you can get back to us. So with what just happened with the governor's Build Better housing projects, what is DPP's role going to be to ensure that the projects comport with sustainable community plans supported by community leaders and the neighborhood boards? Based on my interpretation of the emergency proclamation, all of these plans are meaningless, specific to housing. So do you know what the department's plans will be with the governor's new proclamation?
Well, I think So from what I understand, it'll go through that working group first, and then they're gonna prioritize, and then it'll come to DPP or it'll come to the counties, and we'll have an opportunity to look at it, what the proposal is and what they're looking to waive. At that point, I think we will assess, what the impacts are and whether it requires some kind of, what it can do, what they can do quickly to maybe address some of the impacts, or how these things might be waived, but we want to ensure some semblance of order and be responsible. And so it depends, I think. We'll try to have our input in these projects, but we need to know more about the process.
Okay, yeah, I was going to ask if you had some concerns maybe up front because of it was just announced and how it relates to your department and the responsibilities that you have.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a matter of when we see the first one and how we're going to deal with it. But yeah, it's a very bold initiative.
Thank you, Director. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councilmember Shea.
Maybe it's for you or for Ms. Wong. I was shocked when I read the article about Department of Planning and Permitting taking the initiative to rezone the Halava property. Is it because of the TOD plans? Mr. Strike,
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
The question was, when I saw the article in the paper about DPP taking the initiative in rezoning the Halava property by the stadium. Why is that?
Okay, so Tim Strites, acting TOD administrator. That is what's on our update here. So it's before the Planning Commission next Wednesday. And assuming they close out the public hearing, the two related bills would likely be transmitted to council here the following month. And one of the bills includes zone changes, and the other bill is to establish the special district that's currently in place around Aiea and Waipahu rail stations, a total of 5 so far. And it would just extend the boundary and those regulations over to Halava. So those two items are to implement the key recommendations of the Halava area TOD plan. And so, for example, one of the biggest areas is the stadium property, which is currently zoned for single-family residential, but that doesn't fit with the vision for TOD in the area that was developed through the TOD plan.
No, I'm happy. Thank you very much for clarifying it. Mm-hmm. And for the three of us here, at this point, the four of us, sometimes we don't know what we're approving when we do approve the plans for the TOD and even the zoning. And that's why I'm concerned very much, because when I look at the report, we approved the Ala Moana TOD of last year, but we did not approve the zoning of the TOD for Ala Moana, right? And then when I look at the next page, the sustainable community plans. Explain to me, what is that now, Dina or Tim? The development sustainable community plans. What are those? Would those be in conflict with the TOD plans? Oh, lower, make it.
Can you put the mic lower, please?
Sorry. Okay, so our development plans and sustainable community plans fall under the general plan, and they set forth our broad policy direction for the growth of the island. And the TOD neighborhood plans are a bit more refined, and they do need to be consistent with the DP that they are part of. So you can think of it as like a tiered planning structure with the general plan at the top and funneling down into the TOD plans. And then all of these plans are implemented through things like our zoning code and other rules and regulations.
Okay, it's just that, Ms. Wong, I'm just intrigued about some of our plans that may conflict with our other plans, or zoning. And will that plan take precedence over the zoning, like the TOD? I don't know.
Yes, Councilmember, I think what might be helpful in answering his question, I think you should clarify first, we adopt the plans and then you implement it via ordinances and rezoning, right? That has to come back here. Is that correct? For the TOD plans?
I don't.
Oh, the TOD, oh, you want to answer?
There's adopting the plan and then there's implementation that requires additional steps.
Correct. As far as TOD process goes, the TOD plan is adopted first, and that sets the stage for the recommendations for us to come back before council to present the updated zoning and special district regulations. However, in the interim, there is a section in the land use ordinance that allows for certain properties that qualify to use an interim plan development transit permit. And those have been active in the Ala Moana neighborhood. And when a project does use those, they can supersede the existing zoning and essentially use what the TOD plan recommends in anticipation of us eventually coming in and change the zoning to match that as part of their project proposal.
But see, for me, that's not planning properly. You just piecemealing it in the Ala Moana area because you can come back for the zoning. We should be adopting the zoning first. Like for the Ala Moana TOD zoning to be discussed or to be determined, which is pending. Projects that are going on previous to my time here, they didn't have any zoning. Am I correct?
We're following the structure in the land use ordinance, so we do have to wait until the plans are adopted before we can come in to change the zoning. What you see a lot of kind of to be determined status on that because it does take a lot of effort to submit those packages. And so we've been focusing on the rail station neighborhoods along the line that's already open so that they can take advantage of the rail ridership and support the system.
Thank you very much, Mr. Straight.
Sure.
And my point is just that we may have the plan. They're going to go through the IPDT process, which then circumvents our Ala Moana TOD zoning. Because you're having all these projects that is just piecemeal for me rather than a comprehensive plan of developments in the TOD. Maybe I'm misinterpreting it, but I just bring this up for discussion.
If I may,
Yes,
just to address that. So there definitely was, I think, something that related to your concern there before the plan was adopted. There were various versions that developers were using or incorporating of the plan into their IPDT projects because they use what the current version is. That was, I think, the longest plan to take to get adopted. Now that it's adopted, they have to follow what the plan says. And then that plan will also be what we're presenting to the city council.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. And finally, the question I posed to myself, in the Kaka'ako Ala Moana area district, they don't have to follow the city's plans, right? Because HCDA controls the property of those areas. So they approve everything that we may disagree in regards to the AMI. They have it at 140. The city has it at 120. And that's where I'm just confused and lost. So now we have a lawsuit pending with the Hart in regards to condemnation. A project, I think they had anticipated that they're going to get the Hart project going because that's where they wanted to have their particular development. All of this, I'm just hoping we're not doing it piecemeal by actions of the city council. If you're going to tell me what the plans and the zoning will be, great. If we're going to have permitted uses in regards to hotels in Ala Moana Kaka'ako, great. But don't go and have it all piecemeal by different projects. So I just bring this up because, I do attend the Ala Moana Kaka'ako Neighborhood Board, and I do see what the private landowners are doing, and is that consistent with the TOD or whatever IDPT plans, zoning?
So the Kaka'ako is essentially in the HCDA jurisdiction, and the city doesn't have approval over those projects. So we don't, they have their own TOD plan. I think it's still in draft, if I recall the status of it. The Ala Moana plan does actually extend a little bit and overlap into the HCDA Kaka'ako district because of just kind of continuity planning, but it has no like legal jurisdiction there. It's just for kind of incorporating those fringe areas into the planning of the Ala Moana section.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Members, we are going to move into in-person testimony. Clerks, do we have any in-person testifiers?
Chair, there are none.
Is there anyone else in the council chamber who would like to testify? Please come forward to the testifier podium and state your name for the record. Seeing none, we will now proceed with remote testimony. Clerks, do we have any remote testifiers?
Chair, we have remote testifiers. We have Angela Young.
Angela, you have a mana'o on the TOD plans and zoning status?
Yes. I'm testifying in support of the update from the DPP Development and Sustainable Communities Plan schedule and the TOD plans, the transit-oriented development plans. The city's planning process is made up of 3 distinct tiers. At the first tier of planning, the general plan sets policy guidance for the island, with all subsequent development plans, policy plans, and regulations of the city to be consistent with the general plan. The second tier consists of the 8 regional development plans and sustainable communities plan. The third tier is made up of the specific mechanisms to implement the 2 higher levels of the planning hierarchy. And these include the ordinances and regulations such as the land use ordinance and zoning maps, the subdivision rules and regulations, and the city's capital improvement program.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Okay, clerks, is there anyone else standing by remotely to testify?
Chair, there are none.
Members, we are in discussion. Seeing no discussion, there being no further business, the meeting is adjourned.